When St. Francis Xavier arrived in New York City in 1889, she was told by the Archbishop himself to turn around, get back on the ship, and go back to Italy. Her response? The Pope sent me here, and here I must stay. Frances Cabrini always wanted to do missionary work, but she kind of thought it would be in China. But Pope Leo XIII, hey, we mentioned him last week. Anyway, Pope Leo XIII was very aware of a crisis in the United States. Italian immigrants were arriving in the country and finding themselves destitute. Not to the east, he told Frances Cabrini, but to the west. So, despite having a terrible fear of water due to falling into a river and almost drowning when she was a child, she climbed on board a ship and crossed the Atlantic Ocean. And when she arrived, she was told to turn around and go back home. The Archbishop wasn't ready for her and the sisters. And, he was kind of hoping for priests to take on this mission, not nuns. But Frances Xavier Cabrini had her orders from the Pope himself. And, well, the Archbishop wasn't able to argue with that. She walked straight into the notorious slums of Manhattan. We're talking about potentially one of the worst places in the world at that time. Infant mortality was skyrocketing. The city was filthy and ripe with disease. And Italian immigrants were treated like second-class citizens. So here she is in 1889 in New York City, where an immigration crisis was evident. It wasn't just the Italians, though. It was the Irish as well. And the two groups distrusted each other. The Archbishop of New York, Archbishop Corrigan, and if you couldn't tell by his last name, he was Irish, was already disappointed that the Vatican sent women instead of men. But he did recognize that the Italians were in great need. So he asked the sisters to set up a school for the Italians. The sisters went straight to work, begging for not just their own needs, but what was needed to build a school. When they weren't teaching, they were caring for the sick and feeding the poor. She didn't stop there. She founded an orphanage for girls. And while their other orphanages were known to push the girls out once they turned 14, Cabrini wouldn't stand for that. She and her sisters would work diligently to find adoptive families for these girls, as well as prepare them to live independent lives. Her reputation grew, and it was time for her to take her gifts elsewhere. In 1891, she headed to New Orleans. Now, New Orleans was a very different place than New York City. Although anti-Italian slurs were thrown her way often while she was in New York, in New Orleans, the anti-Catholic and racist hate was everywhere and was violent. And those Southern Italians, they weren't quite white enough. Still, she set up a mission there in an extremely poor Italian neighborhood. In the United States alone, she would help the people of New York and New Orleans, which we've already covered here, but also Chicago, Denver, Seattle, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles. And while in Philadelphia, she met a sister of the Blessed Sacrament for dinner to thank her for her support. This sister would later be known as Saint Katharine Drexel. I love it when these stories converge. It's like a crossover episode. And if you missed the episode on St. Katharine Drexel, it's probably because you're not subscribed or you didn't hit the notification bell. So go on, head over there and do that now. I'll wait. Maybe I'll browse journeytosainthood.com for a while. Okay, done? Good. Because Cabrini's reach didn't end in just the United States. She set up missions in Italy, Nicaragua, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Spain, and France. That is a lot of traveling by ship for someone who has a fear of water. She must have had a lot of trust in God. Later in her life, while in Naples, Italy, she received a message. One of the hospitals back home was in a crisis. The planned expansion was failing, and they needed Mother Cabrini to return ASAP. That meant she had to leave Europe earlier than expected, abandoning the booking her fellow sisters had already made for her. Those sisters in England were disappointed. That meant she was going to miss out on seeing them, as well as the amazing trip they had booked for her on the maiden voyage of the RMS Titanic. Yes, Mother Cabrini had initially been booked on the very ship that would sink in the Atlantic Ocean after hitting an iceberg. She would later refer to her early call back home as divine providence. Yeah. In just 35 years, Mother Cabrini would found 67 institutions, including schools, orphanages, and hospitals for the poor, uneducated, and sick. She would cross the ocean more than 30 times to help those in need. And at the age of 67, the inflammation of the inner lining of her heart, along with a relapse of malaria that she had originally contracted in Brazil, would kill her in the very hospital she had founded in Chicago. As her body lay in state, thousands of people from all walks of life came to pay their respects. And in 1946, she was canonized a saint. And since she was a naturalized citizen of the United States of America, that made her the first U.S. citizen to ever be canonized as saint. So today for my episode, I have 3 major points to wrap it up. Number 1, don't be afraid to be afraid. We can't gloss over St. Frances Cabrini's fear of water. She was terrified of the ocean, yet she crossed it over 30 times. She put her trust in God, knew what she was called to do, and she did it. So pack your bags and get on the boat afraid. Number 2, don't expect a red carpet. Remember how St. Frances was greeted when she arrived in New York City. Turn around and go back. She didn't have the institutional support, the funding, or the trust of the community, but she didn't let no stop her. She shows us that if God has placed a mission on your heart, you don't need a red carpet. You just need a willing heart and some serious determination. Number 3, don't sit around complaining. Mother Cabrini looked at the absolute worst slums of her era, and instead of complaining about the system, she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Today, it is easy to sit back, look at our broken world, and expect the government to fix it. St. Cabrini challenges us to look at our own neighborhoods, our own cities, and ask, what am I actually building? Who am I actually serving? The next time you feel unqualified, terrified, or completely unsupported, think of St. Frances Cabrini standing in front of the Archbishop of New York, being told to turn around and go home, and then quietly say, here I must stay. So go out there and face your deep waters. And as always, be saintly. St. Frances Xavier Cabrini, pray for us.